Welcome back. Here we are with 7 weeks to go now. Seven.
Lucky number seven.
Yeah, so that we're going to be gone. You're still going to be here. Unfortunately for you.
That's the rumor.
Well, we got one more year, Jimmy. So
Well, yeah, but they're going to go quicker and quicker and quicker. Okay, so
no, wait, I want to make a couple comments about the show. I mean, we've
please
had
do.
some people say we like this to look and sound like a conversation because this is what we do. Normally in between things that are going on, we'll get together and have these kind of conversations, and that's why we're a lot unscripted here. You probably noticed by the quality, but we.
I got up and gave a speech on the floor, and somebody said, "You didn't have any notes." I said, "I can't read and talk at the same time."
Yeah, okay. Well, so that's kind of what we. And if the show looks a little unpolished, it's because of that. We want it to look like the conversations that we have whenever we're dealing with legislation. At least that's my feeling.
Right, and
sure.
Don sits next to me on the floor, so I get a lot of that conversation.
Luckily, I'm not between them all the time.
Which is it's good. It's good for Jim because then I can bring him back where he needs to be. So.
Yeah. Well, that's your opinion.
Everybody reined in.
Big week. We I think today we actually third read and sent over to the Senate 15 bills, which is going to put us in like 75.
Right.
Finished and over to the Senate.
Close.
They've taken up 2.
Shoot.
So, they got a lot of catching up to do. Of course, we haven't taken any of theirs up yet. So,
Well, we have actually. We've had at least one of their bills.
Yeah, we did.
Four.
We did
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Senate
even.
before.
They got
Yeah.
one of ours. We got one of theirs. Big conversation this week was the Second Amendment Protection Act.
Correct.
Also known as the Preservation Act, the Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Which is, I think, just what I said, but that's fine.
Volume 2.
Volume 2.
Yeah. And that was the reason why it came up again was because there was a court case that cut out a part of that, and so this was a cleanup, more or less, of the Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Right.
So really voting on what we had voted on before.
Right. And I had noted on the floor today that when we did the Second Amendment Protection Act, it was a reaction to the political climate of the country where there was threats to confiscate our guns, to buy back our guns, to ban our guns, to ban our ammunition, our everything about the Second Amendment was under attack.
The general premise
By the federal government.
By the federal government.
Yeah.
And that bill was passed to protect the citizens of Missouri. We're redoing it because the courts required us to make some changes. But as I noted today, I thought now we have a little more time, we should maybe perfect it a little bit. There was some things in there that may not be right, and this process is just beginning. We will see what the final product looks like.
No, I think you made some good points on the floor, and we talked about it beforehand, before it came to the floor. The ideas are there. Not all of them are great.
Right.
It's not perfect, which you mentioned. Obviously, there's still some consternation by a fair number of law enforcement individuals and agencies that they believe it will hurt them or hurt their ability to do their jobs.
Right.
But I think you said it well. Nothing really we do is ever 100% perfect, and this is part of the process. You reached out to leadership and the other side. They made promises in order to fix those issues that Representative Roberts brought up, which were, I believe, justified, talking to
Absolutely.
other people in the law enforcement. And of course, we respect his background, and so everybody listened. He's like E.F. Hutton, and like Don Roan used to be. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, people perk up, especially when it's that subject matter. So we elected leadership to do their jobs, and I think we all still have faith on both sides of that building that they're going to do that. And this is, like you said, part of the process. We'll get it over there, and if it doesn't come back as advertised, like they said they were going to do, well, then we can make our feelings heard resoundingly.
Oh, we can actually
Just
fix
do it ourselves.
fix it again,
Ourselves, yeah. But
Yeah.
we'll do it. No, I totally agree.
The other thing I brought up, and I think everybody was in agreement with, was the outside elements, the people that are pro-gun and so forth. They forget that the Republican caucus has been 100% in favor of the Second Amendment. We have passed almost every bill that they could imagine, yet when we question anything, they attack us like they really have a word in this. They really don't. We're the ones that have to pass the law, and we have to look and decide, what are we doing the right thing for our citizens?
Yeah, and answer to the voters.
Yeah, and I don't answer to the what goes on social media.
Well, and as you well know, too many times there's a whole lot of information about what the bill has that's really not in there. As on the Second Amendment Preservation Act, it's pretty much known that it's really not a Second Amendment Preservation Act. It is preserving our right, as you said, protection. I think, Jim, is what you were using that word, protecting us from an overreaching federal government.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly.
Agreed.
And someday, and some folks say, well, we don't need it now. Donald Trump is in power. But the truth is that this is for the future, because we've seen in recent years that the federal government waxes and wanes on what they feel like they need to do to the citizenry.
As does this body.
As
This body will not always be
Correct. It's cyclical.
Yeah.
It's cyclical.
But it's a process, and we keep talking about the it's not done,
No.
and it may not be perfect today, and it may not be perfect when we finish it, but it's going to be a lot better than it is today, and it's probably going to be a whole hell of a lot better than what we passed 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Might be 5 years now.
No, it's
Yeah.
2021, I believe.
2021.
I believe.
But the political environment's much different
Oh,
today than it was
for
then.
sure.
I mean, we were in a crisis mode back then,
Mm-hmm.
and we reacted to it. Today we have a little bit of a leeway to be more thoughtful and careful in what we do, and I think we should.
Yeah, and one of the hardest things in this job, which you guys know much more than I do, is trying to keep the emotion out of it, whether
Right.
it's the political environment, the where the economy is, or whatever we're talking about.
Right.
But actually stepping back, taking your emotion, and look at what actually you're trying to do, and does it really make sense for the entire population? Or in this case, the Constitution, you're protecting the overreach of the
Right.
federal government?
Right.
Well, which also, they don't want this to get into this discussion about initiative petition, although we did some of that
We
this
did
week.
that too. Yep.
But the reality is that this particular bill highlights how difficult it truly is to get something right. And so here we are taking another stab at this thing after it being to committee at least 4 times, and being on the floor at least twice, being over in the Senate, doing all of that over there. And so whenever we talk about the initiative petition process, where there's no vetting of those things whatsoever through a deliberative body, that is just left out there with whatever soundbite that people happen to get exposed to. And so this is just a really good example of how much effort actually goes into something seemingly simple as what this bill is trying to attempt to do.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that if this bill, as we passed it out to go to the Senate and let them do their fixes to it, had been on the ballot, it would have passed.
Oh, absolutely.
And it would have been passed as an imperfect item.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to get it back and work on it again, and it'll
Right.
be much better than it was
I agree.
when we started. The initiative petition process really, it's the first one out gets it. It
That's right.
doesn't have to be right.
Right.
It's he who can afford the television commercials. That is really what it boils down to.
And the other thing we talked about during this is the rhetoric that goes on, and both sides are
Sure.
very much guilty of that.
Mhm.
But we did a school safety bill this week.
Yeah.
which was very comprehensive on all the different things we need to protect our children, and that almost turned into a debate
Political debate
on guns, which
Right.
really had nothing.
Didn't have anything to do with it.
No.
You know, it had nothing to do with what we were trying to do to assure that the guns or nothing else could hurt our children. So, you know, there was that.
And so on our side, those folks, including me, with the consternation on it, was the fiscal note that went along with it.
Right.
But that we do need to make some investments, and those, sometimes those investments that we're going to require from the state level, they need to be supported fiscally, and so if we're going to make a requirement, and I've talked about this a lot, is that we frequently have these unfunded mandates that come down from on high, and then we expect our local jurisdictions to do with less in order to implement those.
Of course, the
particular
mandates
things.
were only for new construction; they weren't for
Correct.
retrofit.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
there's not going to be any real impact on schools as they are now. But I honestly believe that if you're going to build a new school, you should
You
build
should
it
be-
safe.
Yeah.
But put that in. That's the cheapest place to put it
That
in.
is the
That is
cheapest.
New
place to-
construction is where
Yeah,
you
so
add that.
retrofitting is
It's
crazy.
a whole lot easier to put air conditioning
Amen.
in a building than come back and try to retrofit it for us,
This
right?
building here.
For example,
So-
just
so-
for
much better.
example.
So, Sean, what do you have going, and what bills are you tracing?
Keep trying to get through. Yeah, there's I appreciate you guys letting me come in. By the way,
Well,
been a few weeks. We've trying to got it put together. It's all
you know,
right.
you drew the
Schedule-
short straws.
Well, yeah, I think I was the last one in the room, but it happens. So I've got a couple going through. One, there's dealing with MoDOT contracts and stuff like that. It's basically just a transparency bill, and that's kind of what I've been trying to focus on since I've been here. You know, trying to find your niche and what interests you as you come into this building, and then what your background. It just depends on everyone's different. So this one I found, it was passed on down from Senator Lukemeyer, had it for a while, but of course him in leadership, he hasn't been able to. He's not taking any bills this year, but
Right.
so we started working on that again and catching up to it. And basically all it does is once MoDOT, their engineer's estimate, and I want them to put that on their website so the people of Missouri know where the money is going, where their tax dollars are going. It's after the contract's awarded. There's no possible. There's 12 other states already doing this, and have been doing it for years. So there's no critical information being leaked out that would upset the bidding process through the private industry or MoDOT. I think both parties are protected, and I think it's just fairly simple and straightforward. And I'm hoping to get that. I think we've got a lane through it through the Senate, and hope to get it to the governor's desk.
Well, I particularly liked your bill, as I said in committee, because it's what I'm a professional engineer, and whenever I do public projects, it's a matter of habit that the engineer's estimate goes on the top line of the bid tab. We call that a bid tab. That's where all of the bids from all of the contractors who have bid on a project lays out on the individual items that were bid on. And then the engineer's estimate goes up at the top for a comparison. And sometimes the engineer can get embarrassed. We always say in the engineering business, we don't want to be the low bidder on a project that we've made an estimate on. But that's a bit of accountability, like you said.
A little bit. Yeah.
But it's extremely important on public projects because we want to know what it is that we missed as the designer, the engineer on the
Certainly.
project. But the next most important part of the information is how did we get it so wrong on how the industry was responding to a particular part of that project. It's extremely important and very necessary, as you pointed out, from an accountability standpoint, and there's no reason to not do it. The excuses that we heard are not good reasons to not do it. As you pointed out, every one of those bids are now public record, and why shouldn't the engineer's estimate be public
Part of
record
it,
also?
yeah.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
there anything else
There-
that you're tracking?
Yeah, so there's another one. There's here local there in Kansas City. So I'm just up north in Platte, Buchanan County, just north of Kansas City by the airport for the viewers. 13th district.
They're about as far west as you can get from me.
Yeah, I'm literally on the Kansas border. Actually, yes, my district is. So
And I'm on the,
you're on the other
Illinois,
side.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Well, what we need is a 3-lane highway between you guys. That's
I think,
really what we need.
man, that's a great
That's a
idea.
great
We should
idea.
get the governor to back something like that. Another thing I have, just a local area, the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority, the commissioners up in Platte and Clay County, without getting into detail of how the commission is built, but basically, and quickly, the commission, when there's a vacancy on the Transportation Authority Commission, the Platte County Commissioner or the Clay County Commissioner, whichever the vacancy is, submits a list of 3 nominees to fill that vacancy. And
sounds like the Supreme Court.
kind of. And then the Kansas City mayor picks one off the list. That's how the statute's been for almost 50 years, and it's been working. That way everybody's represented. The whole, throw tea in the harbor kind of thing. Representation without or taxation without representation. Unfortunately, the last decade or plus, the current mayor has decided not to go off that recommendation and pick someone he prefers to be on the list.
Oh,
And
That
no
doesn't
one
work
has
very
done
well.
that in the past until this mayor.
Wow.
And so we tried to do it down at the local level, just let the local government take care of it.
Yeah.
Hey, this is what we'd like, and we got no love. So we decided to make sure the statute is clarified that he
Yeah.
must not
Oh.
just select the replacement, he must select from the
I bet-
nominees
I bet
given
you
by
get
the
a lot-
county.
I bet you get a lot of grief on local control, don't you?
I do for some reason. but unfortunately,
local controls not really an inside joke, but that's a thing that gets bandied about in this building a lot.
And I think all of us agree, Leah. As far down as you can push local control is probably better. Let the people decide
Sure.
at the
One
local level.
agreed,
But
100%.
however, part of state government's responsibility and
That's when
also
they
the
do it
federal
wrong to fix it.
is when you have to
Yeah.
protect your constituents from
Right.
the local government abusing their power. And unfortunately, it came to this, so that's why we ended up going with that one.
Yeah.
That's good.
So that one's going, and I think that one will get through. We got a lot of support both sides again. And then my other one I've been working on for about 3 years is our circuit clerk's pay here in our rural. Mostly it's for the rural courthouses. Trying to get a circuit clerk to stay in a rural courthouse and do the job that they're required to do with a small staff, coming in on Saturday morning at 2 a.m. out of bed to go in and file the paperwork for an emergency warrant or
Yep.
whatever. Unfortunately, because the world we live in, trying to get someone to bow down or come in after working 40 hours the whole week, if not more, and then come in on the weekend on their time in the middle of dinner or basketball practice to do this for $45,000 to $50,000, they can go to the outside private industry and get more than that and have their own free time forever. So we're trying, in order to also retain the people that we do have, but also recruit people from private industry to come work in a courthouse and do this important job. Whether it's a big class, whether it's a big group and the clerk's supervising 40 employees, or it's a clerk's office of 5 people and they're all doing every part of it. And they're added responsibilities that we push down them, whether it's the expungement from Amendment 3s and things like that, and all the other
Yeah.
stuff that they have to do. These little
So
clerks.
It's just like any business.
Right.
We have to be competitive.
Right. And we
have
control.
We have to treat them.
And the house, and
Right.
this building controls because they are state employees.
We heard this last year.
Correct,
and
yes,
it-
right.
A couple of years now,
Couple
and
now.
the thing to point out on that is that I'm glad you brought up the rural districts,
Yeah.
because the 25th judicial district is a very rural. That's kind of the south central of the I-44, kind of cuts through the middle of it, right in the middle of the state, and that circuit has the 4th highest caseload in the state.
A lot.
And we do all of that with 2 circuit judges, where districts that have a lot more people and a lot less caseload, they have 3 to 4 circuit judges to do the same thing. Well, all of that work is put on the circuit clerk.
Correct.
And the circuit clerk then is responsible for all the paperwork that goes along with that. And quite honestly, my circuit clerk could, as you just said, take one step outside the door, turn around and come back in and be a professional court stenographer and make double the money.
For sure.
Double the money with doing practically the exact same job. And that's honestly, that's what we compete with at state jobs,
Right.
our government jobs, and that's everything from truck drivers
To
to
everything.
our
Yeah,
circuit
and-
clerks.
And what we've talked here about is 3 or 4 bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, today we got 13 bills out that we've been working on
For
Yeah.
years.
for-
Some
Some
years,
of them for
some
years,
years,
yeah.
yeah.
So you know, it's sometimes it's a very
It
complicated.
is, like you said, it shouldn't be easy.
And the issues are many, and you know, it's amazing that how we depend on each other, because as I'm not an engineer, when I listen to Don speak about it, you know, his opinions on engineers, they have deference with me.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because
We can't be experts on
I
everything.
cannot be an
No.
expert on everything.
No.
But I
200,
I learned from him. I hope he learns
Yeah.
something from me.
Yeah.
I'm never sure of the way he talks
Well,
to me. but,
there's
yeah,
that.
There's that.
Well, there's
Keep you on your toes.
there's benefit in learning the wrong way too. So there's
I had a bill third read this week, and it's just a simple bill that says that local governments can't interfere with the course of practice of the medical profession.
Right.
makes
Because
perfect sense.
we have boards that
Yes.
that control them and set up their rules. They've gone through their entire education, and they have to get continuing education. And suddenly we have local governments thinking that they're doctors and can tell you what you can and cannot do. And that's not a power we ever gave
No.
them, but it's one that they've tried to take in
assume,
some
yeah.
cases. So that basically says in statute, you can't do this. It's the purview of the state to
Well, we
license them.
That's,
Well, the lady from the other side of the aisle summed it up better,
Pretty well.
better than it could be summed up. She was very eloquent about it. Representative Prouty,
Prouty, yeah.
and you know, she, like I said, her summary was perfect for what it was exactly, and you pointed out what those issues were.
Yeah. She said that she's licensed, and you know, she's gone through everything she needed to do to get licensed from the state to have her education. She didn't want to have to go through, you know, and argue with the local government, the school boards, and the fire district, and all of those things with different sets of rules and tell her what she can and cannot do when she's been trained to do what's right. So
She took a state test.
She took a
Yeah,
state test.
and
So
that was
therefore-
put together by
By the
her
state.
peers and
Right.
the state officials who control that licensing
which is
process.
what this bill
Yeah.
will protect.
and that's how it was
Protect
all
her.
set up in the beginning. and
That's
all.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's how it was intended.
Um,
you know.
Is there anything else we want to? Let's talk about the budget real quick,
No,
because
yeah,
we're going to run
yeah.
out of time.
Yeah,
yeah.
so budget, we got through markup this week, and so we got it out of budget committee, and the next week we will be voting the budget out. We're in that $51 billion category. We won't know until we're complete with it next week.
I heard it was less than that.
Now, we're probably going to end up somewhere in that. No, we sent out 50.5 billion, I believe it was, and we're now, keep in mind that's coming down from 54 billion a couple of years ago into I believe it was 52.5 billion last year, and some of that's a tiny bit deceptive because that's as federal money bleeds out of the
Right,
system. But yes, that's.
Yeah, last night I think the speaker told me 48. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll know for sure next.
I guess
week.
we'll see.
Yes, we will. Well, keep in mind that's still House Bill 19 and House Bill 20 yet to go.
Oh,
Right.
so
And so
you
there's
got the-
those will add into the
20
total
will,
budget,
yeah.
but yes, the operating budget is probably around 49 billion-ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I understand is about 6 billion less than the governor asked for.
Yeah.
Four.
4 billion.
4
less than
billion,
the government.
yeah.
Okay.
So we're being a little tighter
tighter,
than
Right.
than he was, but.
Well, I have a little bit of the issue, me personally. I know that the CRE, the consensus revenue estimate, was agreed on by Senate, House, and the governor, but I'm always wanting to be a bit conservative
More
on that CRE because that's what determines what
Well,
we're
I
gonna
know
actually
next
budget.
week we're going to have a lot more to talk about on the budget because we're going to actually get to see
Actually
the
see
line
it,
by
line
line,
by
and
line.
you know
Yeah.
you've seen a lot of it because you've been on budget. We haven't. I did manage to get $250,000 in the budget for our baby box
Yeah. Good job.
program, and
Yeah.
so we
We've had
we can
two now.
Oh no,
Right,
we're up.
how many?
We're up to 6.
No, I mean how many babies
Oh,
have
we've,
been?
we've only had.
I thought we
one.
had one over on the west side somewhere, just not too long. Maybe it was a different state. Actually.
Well, we did have.
Didn't-
You're right. There have been
most recently.
been 2. Yeah.
Right, two. So we've saved
So,
two. So that's
That's good.
I think that's worth $250,000 any day.
Oh, any day. Oh,
So,
one would
so,
have been worth
so
it.
one,
Yeah, I mean-
one last thing that kind of highlights the other part of our job here is that a lot of the work that we do here in the constituent services aspect of it is probably a good portion of all of our jobs that doesn't have anything to do with legislation. And I specifically point out that the FEMA maps, the flood maps that we've got that are being updated throughout the state, and I encourage folks to pay very close attention to that. But in the Lake of the Ozarks area, there were some issues with a preliminary map that had come out, and Representative Vernetti and I had a meeting with SEMA on that issue. I talked to him about technical issues that I think that they did not consider very well, and had some data that they did not consider. They agreed to go back and do some reruns on it. They were already in the process of cleaning up the data issues. Well, I'm happy to say that the new maps, as a result of those reruns, has come out and in very good favor of the folks at Lake of the Ozarks, as we kind of predicted would, once the data was completely considered. Just wanted to point out some of the stuff that we
So,
do on
yeah,
the side. We never.
So,
we
so I
never
guess your
looked at-
point
yeah.
is that we don't just come up here and sit around and
Yeah.
go out and push buttons.
Push buttons and
Yeah.
yeah.
There's
Do
actually-
podcasts.
Yeah, do podcasts.
Yeah, well,
Listen to him all
there's a
day.
bunch of.
There's actually some work here.
There actually is work
And-
behind the scenes as well.
Yeah.
And again, it points to the amount of deep dive you have to take into these things to come up with
Yeah.
proper
The
decisions.
proper
You-
decision.
You just
yeah.
can't
you
read.
can't just go off the first
yeah.
look. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Just not a
It's
bunch of
always
pretty-
deeper than it is.
you know.
Not a
Bunch
bunch of
of
pretty
pretty
faces,
faces,
right
right.
up
Well,
there, right?
that goes without saying. We will end on that.
Good idea.
Uh,
I concur.
Thank you for watching. We will be back again next week with more of the
Krusty and his friend Krusty are.
fantastic
Krusty.
Conversation.
The Odd Couple.
Yeah, the Odd Couple. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Hey,
for
Sean,
coming.
thank you
of course,
for coming.
yeah.
We appreciate
Yeah,
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sean, where's your district? I didn't.
Platte and Buchanan counties, north of Kansas City, the airport, all the way up basically to St. Joe, Andrew County line. So.
Well,
Yeah, if you need a
And-
place to park your car when you're
There's-
when you fly
Yeah.
out.
and his
Yeah, exactly.
brother has a fantastic little restaurant there. that-
Yeah, it's pretty
It's
decent.
an Irish pub, and I love those.
Yeah, they're
All
very
right.
nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.